Merry Christmas from Demeech!
There's been a lot of hype surrounding Donkey Kong recently. For me, there's always hype surrounding Donkey Kong. But the reason because of this is the Mario movie is including a lot of references to the Donkey Kong series. Of course, Donkey Kong is in the movie, but there are all sorts of characters from the series, and when you have Kiddy Kong in a blockbuster, that's when you know things could be quite bright for the future. So, with that being said, I am joined here by all the way from DK Isle himself, the king, the Kong, the legend himself, Uncle Al.
Hey, how's it going? I'm the uncle guy.
He is the uncle guy, and he's also probably the biggest DK fan out there. And with that being said, we wanted to do a discussion talking about our experience with the Donkey Kong series, some of our favorite games, as well as what could a future game be, what would we like to see from it, and overall, what could we see from it. So I think a good place to start is, what was your first experience with Donkey Kong? And, overall, where did your love for the series begin?
Well, this takes me back. My first video game ever actually was Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo. We got like the Donkey Kong SNES bundle. I think I just remember the box, and Donkey Kong Country was plastered on the front of it. The big Super Nintendo box. That's really where I got my start with this series, and I played all three games back on the Super Nintendo. It was, that's really what started, I'd say. And I've played Donkey Kong games my whole life. Then pretty much most of them. Most of the big ones that are out there. And the platforming in those games, it's tough as nails, and I love that. And the music from those games is just gorgeous. David Wise is a musical genius, and and just the characters too. They're so much fun. They're quirky. They have that rare '90s like sense of humor to them and characterization that I just love. And yeah,
I will say, with the original Donkey Kong Country trilogy on the Super Nintendo, that is definitely a great starting point, because that's pretty much where Donkey Kong Country started. Not pretty much, that's where it started. And with the characters and such, they originally were going to have like standard Donkey Kong characters like the original DK and Donkey Kong Jr. And with the new characters being introduced, I feel like those characters kind of were replaced. So, in the sense, I would like to see Donkey Kong Jr. back, but you think that the characters introduced by Rareware are better than Nintendo's original vision?
Yeah, probably, to be honest, just because, there wasn't really much to Donkey Kong before Country games, it was just Donkey Kong, and, he kidnaps Pauline, and Mario has to get in there and save him, and then in the next game, he's there's Donkey Kong Jr., and that's really all there was to it. So, like, the Country games, like, really, solidified the identity of Donkey Kong that we know still to this very day, and, I think that's what me and a lot of, I would say probably most other Donkey Kong fans really attach to is, those Country games.
Yeah, but is it really a Donkey Kong game without Stanley the Bugman?
I don't know. That's kind of up for debate. So,
All jokes aside, with the Donkey Kong Country trilogy specifically, I grew up with the Wii and the DS, and the good thing about the Wii is that there was a virtual console, so I was always interested in experiencing the history of the Nintendo series that I've been interested in. So my first time playing it was on the Wii with the virtual console, and even then, even though I didn't grow up in the Super Nintendo era, I was just blown away by these graphics that seemed impossible to be on a 16-bit console. This was really like the first of its kind with the pre-rendered graphics, and the graphics are definitely a highlight of Donkey Kong Country. But as you said, the platforming is it's tight as nails. It's a challenging game. which is something I appreciate because nowadays we don't really get a lot of challenging games. And the characters are great. I do find it to be interesting that Donkey Kong is only playable in one of them. With the other ones, it's Diddy Kong and Dixie Kong, and then Dixie Kong and Kiddy Kong. But when it comes to the original trilogy, I've always had nothing but good things to say about them, and they've been great experiences. But oddly enough, when it comes to experiencing the trilogy, Donkey Kong Country 3 is my favorite out of them. I know that 2 is a common pick, but I just feel like Donkey Kong Country 3 has better level design, and I like the theming a bit more. But I'm curious to know, what's your favorite out of the original trilogy?
You know, the nostalgia in me always wants to say the first game because that's well, it's where I got my start with the series, and I have a lot of nostalgia for it. But I can recognize that 2 and 3 are both like better games, probably. If you held me at gunpoint and really forced me to choose one, I probably have to say Donkey Kong Country 2. The levels are just so well made. The music is wonderful. I love the theming of it with the pirates and stuff. It's all just so imaginative and creative and just really well designed. It built upon the first game in meaningful ways and really just made an excellent experience out of it. But yeah, I mean the third game is really good too. To be honest, like I, I held it to a higher standard after getting to replay them on the Switch Online, like 2 years ago, I think now, or something like that.
Yeah, they
Um,
added Donkey Kong Country 3, I think at the end of 2020. It took that
yeah,
long to get
yep.
it, but here we are. I didn't get the expansion, so if they add Donkey
Nah,
Kong 64, I won't be able to play it there, but I do have a Nintendo 64 and I have a Wii U where I could play it. That is a very interesting game, but when it comes to the trilogy, like I said, I experienced that, but for Donkey Kong, my first introduction to the series was with Mario, because I started playing Mario games at the time, and I noticed that Donkey Kong is a character. I think Mario Kart Wii is where I really started with the Donkey Kong series, and that's an interesting game to bring up because that has not only Donkey Kong, not only Diddy Kong, but also Funky Kong. So in Mario Kart Wii, I was being exposed to a lot of the Donkey Kong series, and I thought, I really want to check out the Donkey Kong series. And this was like 2010. I got Mario Kart Wii in the summer of 2010. And right around the corner was a new Donkey Kong game, Donkey Kong Country Returns. And that birthday, I got the game. And it's easily one of my favorite Wii games. And it's one of my favorite platformers. It did a great job bringing Donkey Kong back while also doing a lot of things that other games in the series didn't do, and also just bringing in new mechanics not seen in many games. Things like jumping into the background, that was really cool, interacting with the environment. I feel like Donkey Kong Country Returns was really just the start of what should be standard for modern 2D platformers. And with that being said, there were the new Super Mario Bros. Games around this time, but looking back in retrospect and looking at some of the modern 2D platformers now, I think that Donkey Kong Country Returns was really just the start of an era of more sophisticated 2D platformers.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. Like, Returns was first of all, it was just a really great return to form for DK after kind of being from the platforming spotlight for I don't know, like 10 years or something like that. I think since um, DK64, I believe. And then Tropical Freeze came along too, and just like the second Donkey Kong Country game, it built upon the foundation of Returns, and really just took the series to the next level. Like, I mean, Tropical Freeze is honestly just one of the best platformers, period, that are out there that you can play. I mean, it is just phenomenal. Um, and yeah, like I do think that since then, we've seen just this wide array of platformers that have come out, and it's it is a great time to be a fan of platformer games, to say the least.
I will say, I have found it kind of odd that there aren't many Nintendo 2D platformers anymore because we used to get them all the time in the Wii U and Wii era. Perhaps too many of them. But now I'm trying to think of recent examples of 2D platformers, And other than Kirby and Yoshi, I really can't think of many, but even so, I mean, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, I definitely agree with you. Not only is it one of the best platformers, it's my favorite 2D platformer. The design is just phenomenal, music is great, graphically it is gorgeous. That game is near perfection, and considering Christmas is coming up and Tropical Freeze kind of has the winter theme, I might be covering it. I think that'd be a fun game to do. Also, Donkey Kong Country 3 has a
Yeah.
northern hemisphere thing going on where it has the winter theme. It's actually based on Canada. So, Tricky Nick, if you are hearing me right now, we gotta do a collaboration for Donkey Kong Country 3. But yeah, I feel like the retro games specifically, they go for a very different tone compared to the Rareware games where they're more realistic in the sense of they went for the pre-rendered graphics and the environments just in general. They looked incredibly realistic for the time, and even now, just looking at the art design, it's definitely going for a more serious, realistic tone, and it's great. And I think it looks phenomenal even to this day. But then Retro went for a more zany, cartoony design for the series, and I think that also looks great. But really, what looks better and what the series should do going forward just comes down to a matter of preference.
Yeah, I would say so too. Yeah, like those games from back in the day on the Super Nintendo, they were really just trying to impress visually, from a graphical standpoint, and Retro's games weren't really trying to push the boundaries of what the hardware was capable of or anything like that, which was fine. It was a different direction. It was a little more cartoony, but they really still managed to kind of carve out their own space in the DK legacy, I guess you could call it, the DK timeline or something like that. And yeah, they stand on their own 2 feet in their own unique way, and they are also just phenomenal platforming games too. So, um, yeah,
With the Donkey Kong series, like you were saying with Retro, yeah, they went for a different sort of design for the series, but even going back to Donkey Kong Country Returns, I do feel like that game specifically took advantage of the hardware of the Wii, and it still is one of the best looking games on the system, and I'd say Tropical Freeze as well. Though if we're talking about like going for something along the lines of a more, grander Donkey Kong game in scope, like something like a 3D platformer, is that what you were really referring to by saying that, they weren't exactly the games that were designed to impress like the Super Nintendo games were?
yeah. I mean, like I know at the very least for DK64, but you were kind of asking about that, right? For in terms of like the graphical capabilities of it or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think they were trying to do something a little bit there maybe. I mean, it is a good looking N64 game. But obviously like games from that era don't hold up like that amazingly like visually or anything like that cuz everything's just very blocky and kind of rudimentary, very early 3D. Um um
I think that's just with most Nintendo 64 games, though, because I can't think
right,
of
yeah.
really any that have held up that well.
Right, any games from that era, you know what I mean? But
Maybe Banjo
yeah,
Kazooie and Tooie, and I actually do like Donkey Kong 64, but many games just do not hold up well.
yeah. Yeah, I I guess yeah, I guess the point I was trying to get to there I guess was just that, that era wasn't really I don't really think they were pushing for graphical fidelity as much as like maybe the previous generation with the SNES or something like that. I don't know. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore.
Yeah, I haven't known what I've been talking about for, let's see, how long has it been since Switch Sports was revealed? Yeah,
Oh,
it's almost been a year. But,
yeah.
it'd be nice. Nintendo, I might be able to forgive you if we get a new Donkey Kong game. And with this movie, like I was saying, this could be a possibility. This could be an outlook towards the future of Donkey Kong. And I'm curious to know, do you think that a new Donkey Kong game will be coming soon?
I think it's safe to say that something is definitely in the pipeline. I mean, there have been rumblings for years that there's like a Donkey Kong game on the way. And depending on who you listen to, you might have heard some stuff about that too. And I think this is just another footprint in the lead up to the grand reveal. Now, who knows when that's going to take place? I mean, it could be any time between now and like the reveal of the next Switch console, for all we know. I don't know, but you know, I do think something's on the way, and this is good evidence towards that. The Universal parks are, good evidence towards that as well. Um, the future's looking bright, I would say. That's how I'm feeling.
The new Donkey Kong game, the reveal is literally just going to be a Twitter drop. Nintendo is just going to announce out of nowhere, new Donkey Kong game, have fun. Or
I don't know.
they'd probably tweet something along the lines of just a banana emoji and then just reveal the new game.
I don't know if that'll be a good thing or a bad thing because it might get a lot of buzz, but I don't know.
Well, a new Donkey Kong game revealed in any sort of capacity is going to be great, but with this sort of game where there's been a lot of build up and considering they're doing the theme park and it's a big part of the Mario movie, I don't think a Twitter drop would do this game justice. You could do that with something like Pikmin 3 Deluxe or smaller scale games like that, but with Donkey Kong, I do feel like that would have to be in a sort of direct or maybe have its own presentation. And I do feel like with the theme park and the movie, there's a lot of evidence towards a Donkey Kong game. And I do feel like Nintendo might be trying to bring Donkey Kong back into the spotlight because it is one of the most iconic series in gaming. He's one of the most iconic characters. But the recent games haven't sold too well. To be fair, Tropical Freeze was on the Wii U, so you weren't really going to find many games that sold too well there. It sold over like 2 million copies, but even so, he's been in sort of hibernation, and they might be trying to bring him back into the spotlight, because they could definitely do it. It just comes down to marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And yeah, I agree with you too. I mean, there have been rumblings that Miyamoto has been a big advocate for trying to bring DK back in a big way, within Nintendo. And like I think it makes sense. It's been so long now since the last DK game. It almost feels like something has to be happening. Because I mean, even if they just do another Retro Studios Donkey Kong Country game, sure it'll be kind of cool, but I don't think it's gonna make waves. It's like it kind of feels like the ship has sailed on getting a third game out in that series. Kind of feels like they need to retool the series and do something new and inventive and interesting to kind of bring it back in a big way that will appeal to like a mass audience. I kind of think that's probably what's going on. Of course, it's hard to say. This is all just kind of going on feelings, but it does, it does kind of feel like something is going on.
I do wonder if Miyamoto's been an advocate for it. You think he's working on it? Because with Pikmin 4 announced, I'm sure that that's the game that he's working on right now. He really doesn't seem to be involved with game development that much anymore.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I honestly don't think he probably has much of a hand in like the actual development of this game. But like, I think the current like belief is that there is a new team that was built internally in Nintendo, specifically with their EPD division, which is responsible for like Mario Odyssey and like Donkey Kong Jungle Beat and games like those. And it's comprised in part by Rareware Donkey Kong fans, people who grew up playing those games and have an admiration for the lore and the legacy of the series, and are trying to kind of take that as a starting point and do something with it. Now, of course, I can't say whether or not any of this is true. I really don't know for sure, but it's what's currently believed to be going on in there. So
Nintendo's a very unpredictable company, but I mean, if you have Donkey Kong being a huge part of the Mario movie, and you have a theme park section dedicated to Donkey Kong, that could only mean that there's going to be a new Donkey Kong Jr. math. It's all leading up to that. It's leading up.
Oh
It's
yeah.
either leading up to Donkey Kong Jr. Math or a new Donkey Konga game. Although to be fair,
Yeah, with
Donkey
you.
Kong or Donkey Konga, I'd like a new one, but I prefer a mainline game before that. Can you imagine
Yep,
if
with
they did
the.
that though?
Oh my gosh. I don't. If that would be their way of bringing DK back, I don't know if I would have words. I think I would probably just have to leave the internet at that point.
No, after a decade, here's the Donkey Kong you've been waiting for. And Donkey Kong comes swinging in and has the bongos. There's a new one for the Switch, and it reveals a new Donkey Konga. This would be kind of
God.
like Federation Force or Amiibo Festival. Although I feel like a new Donkey
Yeah.
Konga would be at the very least a good game. Federation Force is
Ye-
fine, Amiibo Festival not so much, but could you imagine if that happened, what the reaction would be?
Oh boy, it would be rough, and I would hope that they've learned their lesson after, dropping stuff like that, like Federation Force. The issue isn't the spin-offs themselves. Like DK spin-offs would be great. It's just the fact that we haven't had a mainline game in like nearly a decade. So it's, that would be the real stinger there.
I wonder how the Nintendo Defense Force would go about defending the game. Donkey Konga might not be exactly what you want, but Donkey Konga isn't a mainline Donkey Kong game. But it's not part of the main series either, it's not canon. So it's okay. Or you
Yeah.
should be grateful that Sakurai gave you Donkey Konga, even though Sakurai has no involvement. I think just seeing the defenses would be the funniest thing about it. Just seeing something along the lines of, you should be grateful Nintendo gave you Donkey Konga, or just stuff like that would be hilarious to see. I've seen defense of Nintendo Switch Sports, so anything is possible. But I don't think they're gonna actually reveal new Donkey Konga as the new mainline game, or I don't think they're gonna reveal any sort of spin-off. There was a weird spin-off I did hear about though, many years ago. It was a Donkey Kong Taiko no Tatsujin crossover. This sort of goes into Donkey Konga again, but there's something about that. Have you heard anything about it? Because
No,
I remember you did a video about it years back, but any updates
I
since
did.
then, or?
Nah, I think that was just, somebody blowing smoke on the internet, some random Redditor like, I'm
Oh,
gonna
like the
pretend
Star
that
Fox
this
thing
game is
again.
real. Right, yeah. I don't think there was any validity to it. That's why I kind of shied away from, reporting on any of that kind of stuff too. Just because, the problem with talking about that kind of stuff is it fuels more people to go out and spread misinformation like that, So knowing that they're going to get the headlines or the videos talking about their posts and that kind of stuff. So it's just better off to stick to more tangible evidence and that kind of stuff. So
Well, the good news is, if those rumors come up, we'd have to stop hearing about the Switch Pro for a little bit, which would be nice, but even so, I feel like with this new Donkey Kong game, they're gonna have to go in a direction that is something that's either different or something impressive. Because, like you said, it's been almost a decade since Tropical Freeze. It'll be 9 years next year. So if they went for a third entry in the Retro Studios line of the Donkey Kong Country games, no matter how good it's going to be, I do feel like there will be a level of disappointment because it's just been so long. And just the Switch in general, obviously, I'm not afraid to criticize the Switch and how I feel about it, and you're not either. We're on a very similar page when it comes to that. But I will say, when the Switch games are good, they're ridiculously good. Like, they're some of the highest highs, the best games Nintendo has made. And they do a lot of things that we never would have expected to see. We got the return of Sandbox 3D Mario with Super Mario Odyssey. Kirby just jumped into 3D. So, with Donkey Kong, I'm thinking that we could get a 3D platformer.
I think I really do think that's probably where it's going to. That's what I want to believe anyway. Just because, like, I, you know, I mean, there's a couple reasons why I'd like to see it. For one thing, 3D Nintendo games have historically performed better than their 2D outings. Minus some outliers like the new Super Mario Brothers series and stuff like that. But people see 3D as more ambitious, and while that's not necessarily like entirely the case, I do think that there is, you know, obviously like a bigger range of things that you can do in a 3D environment. And it's been so long since the last 3D Donkey Kong game, of which there has only been one. It just feels like this is a good opportunity to reintroduce DK to the world in a big, like, 3D platforming adventure. Um, you know, the fact that it'll be the second one ever is also just a big selling point for it. It feels like if they really want to make a splash, that would be the way to go.
Yeah, it's been a very long time since Donkey Kong 64. The game came out, I think, a little over a month before I was even born, so 23 years without a 3D Donkey Kong. I do wonder if Rare was still Nintendo in the GameCube era. Could we have seen a 3D Donkey Kong on the GameCube?
Oh, almost undoubtedly. I'm sure they probably would have done that. It seemed like they had a lot of stuff planned for the GameCube. I mean, Banjo 3 was probably going to happen, and there was the announced but never released Donkey Kong Racing, which was also going to be on GameCube. So I'm sure they probably would have done another Donkey Kong game for the GameCube, but yep, as is life.
Yeah, it just stinks that they had so many things planned for the series. They had the Donkey Kong Racing game, which looked incredible, but unfortunately we never got that one. They also had some other stuff like Diddy Kong Pilot, which that game you can actually play. I believe the game actually leaked to the internet sometime in 2011, so it's been out for quite some time, and I've actually played Diddy Kong Pilot. It's pretty good. It's shockingly good for the Game Boy Advance. It's better than Mario Kart Super Circuit, but that really isn't saying that much, considering it's one of the weaker entries in Mario Kart. But
yeah.
I feel like with Rare not having the series anymore, just kind of went in a direction that Nintendo didn't really know what to do with the series. And even until now, since it's been like, what, almost a decade, they really haven't had a specific direction for the Donkey Kong series. Throughout the GameCube era, up until Country Returns in 2010, they had all kinds of experiments and such. They had, of course, Donkey Konga, Donkey Kong, or the DK games on the Game Boy Advance and DS, King of Swing, Jungle Climber. Very good games, but definitely not traditional Donkey Kong platforming. Definitely more like Clu Land. I don't know if you've played those before.
No, I haven't played any of them. But yeah, no, it really did kind of feel aimless, the series after the Rareware buyout. It kind of got passed around to different developers and studios and things up until 2010, whenever Returns came out. And then it seemed like Donkey Kong was going to have his new home there at Retro Studios, but then of course, we only got 2 games from them, and it's been a decade since then. So, still no permanent, solid home yet, but hopefully that's about to change.
Yeah, I'm hoping so too. And of course, there are other spin-offs and such, like Barrel Blast. I think you probably played that one. And
Yes,
I have the game,
yep.
and I just could not get into it. It's not good.
Yeah, it's really not very great, honestly. It's kind of mid.
I think it's cool that there are all the Kongs as playable characters, but it's not fun. It's just a pain controlling the game, which really stinks. But with the controls of Donkey Kong games during this time, Nintendo really wanted to go for the bongo controllers with the GameCube. I believe that Barrel Blast was going to be one of those games. It was going to utilize the bongos for the GameCube. I think that definitely would have made it better, but the reason why I bring this up is because if we're hearing rumors about this new Donkey Kong that's made by Nintendo EPD, and you're bringing up Jungle Beat, going back to Jungle Beat could really give us an insight what this new Donkey Kong game could be like, because I've noticed that with the retro games, the Rareware games, and made by Nintendo directly, Donkey Kong has a very specific and different tone for each of them. With the original Rareware games, more realistic and more serious in tone, it was definitely going for the more impressive, pre-rendered look that was never seen before then. Retro's going for the more cartoony, zany art style and just tone for the game. Like if you play through the game and you're jumping on enemies like the frogs or like balloons and stuff, and there's a very sort of cartoony vibe to it. and it's a little hard to explain, but when you're playing the game, you definitely feel it. But Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is a very interesting game in the sense of its tone. I'm not even including the bongo controls because, yeah, that's a gimmick of the game, but for me, it wasn't even the defining feature. It was also on the Wii with the new play control, and I do feel like it's better there because it's in widescreen. It just feels more fun to control, and you don't have a giant Donkey Kong in the center of the screen or the corner of the screen. I don't know why that was in the GameCube one, but it has a very distinct sort of Nintendo Japan tone to it where Donkey Kong is extremely animated with the facial expressions and the character design in that game. It definitely feels more Nintendo-esque, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it is definitely an outlier in the Donkey Kong series in that it's very unique, you know, and it's honestly a great game. Like, you know, I got to experience it on the GameCube with you know, the bongo controls, and like it controls remarkably well for playing with bongos and having to clap your hands, you know, stun enemies, and you know all that kind of stuff. Um, and you know, I really I wouldn't necessarily mind seeing them try to, you know, inject some of those elements into a newer game because you know, especially when it came down to like the enemies and the kind of designs of the characters and stuff like that. I thought it was, you know, it's just interesting and fun, and I don't know, I wouldn't mind seeing some of that come back.
Yo, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. I've played it on the GameCube and the Wii. I'm currently looking at the GameCube case just to see some of the designs for the enemies and such. And, you know, with the characters in the game, they really did not have any of the established characters. There wasn't Diddy Kong, there wasn't Dixie Kong, and they just introduced a new cast of characters, and there are all kinds of interesting Kongs in that game. Those were the main enemies of it, and Donkey Kong also had a sort of personality like a cartoon character, although a different one than the retro games, where in that game you'd have the boss fights where you're literally beating the hell out of these enemies, or beating the hell out of the Kongs, and I found that to be very interesting to see, but when it comes to Donkey Kong Jungle Beat influence in a new Donkey Kong game, like a 3D one, I think what we could see is like more attention to detail. Because I've noticed with a lot of Nintendo games, there definitely is the attention to detail. Just smaller stuff that doesn't really impact the game, but just makes the experience, you know, more memorable, more immersive. If you're playing Mario Odyssey, Mario's design specifically is more detailed than it's ever been before, and he has more personality compared to the other games. So you think they're gonna go that route with Donkey Kong?
I think it could be interesting to potentially do something like that. You know, I personally, personally, what I would love to see is kind of like a nice marrying of you know, the Rareware ideas with the retro ideas in terms of the tone of the game, I guess, because you know, retro's games were very like ambient and immersive, whereas retro's games you know, were a bit more cartoony and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, kind of seeing like a mix of those for a new game, and attention to detail and environments, nice lush environments and that kind of thing.
Oh, I could
I think
just
would be really
imagine
cool.
that. And I know everyone says a Switch is underpowered, which it is, but we've seen what Nintendo is capable of, and I feel like with a new Donkey Kong game, just seeing the lush environments in HD and looking incredible, that is something I'd be very excited to see. And even in the 2D games, the graphics and just the environments are absolutely outstanding, but seeing that in 3D, my goodness, just thinking about it, I'm getting excited, but I gotta keep my excitement in check because we don't have a new Donkey Kong just yet. In fact, all we have to look forward to are Pikmin, Zelda, and farming simulators, but hopefully that'll change soon. I'm really hoping that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to 3D platformers, the question that is always asked is should it be linear or should it be open world? Because it seems like every game seems to go in an open world route. We've seen it with Mario, with Super Mario Odyssey, although that was going back to the sandbox style. We've seen it with Sonic Frontiers. And we're seeing that with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, although those games are broken, but that's beyond the point. They're still going for the open world. And I feel like with a new Donkey Kong game, You think it's going to follow the trend of going into the open world, or could it be linear? Something along the lines of Crash Bandicoot or such.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say, for me personally, what I really love about the series are those, well-designed, tight kind of platforming sections, and you're not going to get as much of that out of like an open world 3D experience from DK. I mean, you might get something closer to DK64, where it wasn't really so much about the platforming; it was more about running around, collecting things. And while I did enjoy that game, like it's not necessarily what I love about the Donkey Kong series. So I really think maybe skewing more towards the like the Crash Bandicoot way of doing things, where it's a bit more linear, a bit more structured, and so you can still have those challenging platforming sections. While doing Donkey Kong in 3D. I think that would be the ideal way to go about it, at least for me. But that said, if they do end up going in an open world direction, I think it would be really interesting to see them do something unique with it compared to their other, sort of open world games like Odyssey and Breath of the Wild. Do something, do something a little more experimental with it. I would say, yeah.
I would say with the platforming and such, that's definitely something that is lacking in a lot of sandbox 3D games. I will say even Mario Odyssey, it doesn't have as many platforming sections as I would like, but Bowser's Fury is an example that came to mind because I've been playing that recently. And essentially, it's open world, but a lot of the sections are platforming sections. So while you're exploring Lake Lapcat, you're experiencing or finding all these sections where you're doing some platforming or taking out enemies, and you get a catch shine for it. So do you think that structure could work for Donkey Kong, or a more linear structure like Crash would work better?
I think that Bowser's Fury is actually like a really excellent example of like where they could possibly take the DK series, because like like you said, yeah, they do have a lot more like structured platforming sections throughout that little slice of game, or whatever you want to call it. I think doing something like that for DK would be great. You still get the open world elements, but then you can still work in the more challenging, kind of tough as nails sort of platforming elements. And honestly, I think that would be a great way to kind of marry the concepts, because, while yes, I do love the real challenging linear stuff from Donkey Kong, I also love collectathons and getting all kinds of collectibles and platformers and stuff like that. It's just so much fun to run around the world and get all the little pieces and things that you want to get, to complete the game. And so, yeah, doing something like that, I think, would be really cool.
I think that would definitely be the best route to go, because with Bowser's Fury, I find it very interesting with that game specifically, because the idea itself is such a good one. And, obviously playing through the game, it's proven to be an excellent idea. Because it's not like Mario Odyssey where you're going throughout the kingdoms and collecting power moons just by finding them. And I love Super Mario Odyssey, so it's not so much talking about, oh, I don't like the structure of that game, because I love the structure of Odyssey too. But I feel like with Bowser's Fury, having this open world you explore that just expands, and having the challenges you complete with the platforming and taking out enemies, that's a really good concept. And I always wonder just what was the inspiration for Bowser's Fury? Why was it included as part of a port of Super Mario 3D World? And I'm not questioning or complaining about it, because I love this edition, but I'm curious to know why Nintendo did go to the effort to make the side mode for 3D World, whereas with other Wii U ports, it's like what? New funky mode? Peachette?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. You do have to wonder. I know a lot of people speculated that maybe it was kind of a proof of concept for maybe where to take the Mario series in the future. But who knows? Maybe for all we know, it was actually a proof of concept for a potential Donkey Kong game. That's really getting speculative, but I don't know. You never know.
I wouldn't be surprised, because, they could apply that structure to a 3D Donkey Kong game. Sure, they could go for a new 3D Mario game, but I do feel like at this point, 3D Mario might be on the next console, but we could get a new Donkey Kong game. Although if they're
Yeah.
doing their next console, I'm not sure if it's going to be an entirely new platform, or if they're going to go the Game Boy Color route and have something that is more powerful and will have its own exclusive games, but will also be backwards compatible with Switch, something like that. But at the moment, no new console has been confirmed, and we're just left with the standard Switch. Sure, we have the OLED, but that doesn't really bring more power. And considering the Donkey Kong series and going the 3D route or something like that, it does seem like something that could be taxing on the hardware. So, do you think it's possible that the new Donkey Kong game will be on the Switch and be able to run properly? Or you think they're going to save it for the next console? Because even with things on the Switch being able to be, optimized properly and still impressive, things like Super Mario Odyssey and Xenoblade 3, I do feel like we're definitely getting at a point where it's starting to show its age. And when developers have these new ideas for more ambitious games, it's going to be difficult going forward, especially considering we're like almost 6 years after the Switch launched.
Yeah, like I'm kind of two minds when it comes to the Donkey Kong on Switch, because like on one hand, nobody knows how to better optimize Nintendo hardware than Nintendo themselves, and they've put out some gorgeous looking games on the Switch, and I think it would be very possible for them to make a really good looking Donkey Kong game, a 3D Donkey Kong game for the Switch, and have it run well too. I think it's totally possible. Um, but there's a part of me too that thinks back to the fact that you know the original Donkey Kong Country games, for instance, on the Super Nintendo, were graphical showcases for that system. And I think it would be really cool if the new Donkey Kong game was one of their headlining games for like a Switch 2 or something like that really shows off like what the system will be capable of handling graphically. I don't necessarily believe that that's going to happen, and I don't necessarily think that that's the wisest way to reintroduce DK either, just because the Switch has such a massive install base now, like what 120 million consoles sold or something crazy and ridiculous like that. So I think for DK to have the best chance of being seen and played by as many eyes as possible, it would make the most sense to launch it on the Switch, or at the very least, make it a cross-generation release. Have a Switch version and a next-gen Switch version. That would probably be ideal, but whether or not that's going to happen remains to be seen. But I think that would be really cool.
It just seems like with gaming in general now, they go for the sort of, back then they had the Game Boy Color where you'd have the clear cartridges, which you could only play on a Game Boy Color, but then you'd have the backwards compatible black cartridges, which you could play on the original Game Boy, or you could play it on the Game Boy Color but enhanced. We're seeing that with a lot of games. There are games designed for the PS5 that you can play on the PS4. They have upgrades. Same for the Xbox. I think that's a majority of the games. And I feel like with the Switch 2 or whatever the successor will be, they're definitely going to go that sort of route where, yeah, it'll be playable on the base Switch, but it'll be even better on the new Switch. That probably might happen with Metroid Prime 4. I don't know what's going on with that game, but it's been so long that they might be doing that. Although I'm not particularly sure.
Yeah, yeah, I think I agree with you there. And it's honestly getting so late into the Switch's lifespan now that like we are going to start seeing like um stuff about, excuse me, we're going to start seeing stuff about their next gen system probably very soon. It would not surprise me if within the next 18 months or so we have like the next Switch console on our hands. So um it would not surprise me to start seeing maybe like some of these games that were either originally planned for Switch being pushed to the next system, or getting some cross-generation releases or something like that.
And I know the Farm Direct is always brought up because it was hilarious, but that Farm Direct really showcased that Nintendo doesn't have much in terms of the future, at least what they were revealing. We only
Yeah.
know about The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Pikmin 4 coming up, but Metroid Prime 4, that seems to be still in the air. We know nothing about it. There's not a single Mario game that is upcoming that we know about. And, like I said, with the Donkey Kong game, we don't know about that either. So, they probably might be planning it for the next gen Switch. It'd be great to see nonetheless, and I think that there definitely will still be Switch games. But I do find it to be a bit odd of a timeline for Nintendo where they have their most successful console, but really don't have much for the foreseeable future. And I am wondering, you think this is going to be a sort of transition near or year next year? Like 2016 was from Wii U to Switch? You think this is where
Yeah,
things are going to start slowing down?
yeah, without a doubt. Like we are definitely seeing the signs that things are beginning to slow down now. Like you said, there's a lot of games that are kind of just in the air, like what's happening to them, and we don't have like a new Mario on the horizons. We're not even getting a new Mario Kart. That's probably not happening on this current Switch. They've opted to continue updating Mario Kart 8 instead, and I think that's kind of a sign too that like, they're just pushing content for games that they already have out. And I think one of the only major first-party titles coming up, like within the next year that we're aware of, besides Breath of the Wild 2, is Pikmin 4. And like I'm sure that game is going to be great and all that kind of stuff, but it also doesn't really feel like it's like it, the Pikmin series is traditionally fairly niche, so it's not going to like make huge waves when it drops or anything
I
like
mean, I'd
that.
love for that to happen. I'd
Oh
love for
yeah,
that to
me
be the
too.
case. I'd love for Pikmin
Me
to be
too.
one of the best-selling Nintendo series. But
Yeah. No,
unfortunately,
I
that's the reality.
right. No, I completely agree too. Like, I mean, I would love for that to be the case as well. But like you said, yeah, it's just reality. And to me, it kind of feels like maybe they're holding some of their bigger games closer to their chest right now to hopefully get out earlier in the next system's kind of lifetime. So,
I will
I guess
say,
we'll see.
it's a bit odd that Pikmin 4 would be releasing so late into the Switch's life because I know it's niche, but I feel like, well, the Switch already has an install base. They could have marketed it for the new system, but I mean, if they already have a Switch selling as well as it did, and with the install base, I really hope they market it well because I want Pikmin to become as big as it should be, despite the characters being essentially microscopic. I know, puns aside, Pikmin is amazing. You definitely should play the games. Only Pikmin 3 is available on the Switch, but for the longest time, I thought that Pikmin 3 Deluxe replaced Pikmin 4. Were you ever concerned that Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze replaced a potential new Donkey Kong? Because you were bringing up Mario Kart, and yeah, you're right. We don't have a new Mario Kart on the Switch unless you count Live Home Circuit, which a collective amount of 0 people think it's mainline.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, like, I guess that is something that did cross my mind. I can't believe it's been 4 years now, going on 5 years since Tropical Freeze released on Switch. Because I remember when it was announced for the system, and thinking that like maybe that was just a holdover kind of game to keep us satiated until the next DK game comes to Switch. I honestly I don't really know what to believe right now because like we've just mentioned here, it does feel like the Switch is winding down. So realistic, like for the sake of the game being seen and played by as many people as possible, I think releasing it on Switch would be a really good way to go. But I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. It would be really cool though to have a next gen Switch system that has is sporting better graphics, and they use a new Donkey Kong game as a way to kind of market it and advertise it. I think that would be really cool too. So
Oh,
I
that'd
don't
be
know.
amazing.
It's yeah.
I feel
Yep.
like they do that with Mario, though, where Mario showcases what a console is capable of. Because you see
Yeah.
that with the 3D games all the time. Like Galaxy took full advantage of the Wii. Then you had Super Mario Odyssey taking full advantage of the Switch. It really felt like a game that was made for Switch and designed solely around the console. But with all this being said, what do you think is going to happen? Like, if you were to just think of everything Nintendo has done and everything we've seen, the theme park, the movie, what do you think is going to happen with the Donkey Kong series? Because I know we want a 3D Donkey Kong game. We want something ambitious. Do you think they're going to go that route? Or you think they'll probably play it safe, go the 2D route? Or they're going to do something completely different? Just based on what you think Nintendo will do alone, regardless if it's something that you'd want.
Truly do think something more ambitious is coming from the Donkey Kong series, and I think that it's very, very solidly possible that that might be a big 3D game. I really do believe that deep down because we already have Tropical Freeze on Switch, so the 2D Donkey Kong game is covered for the Switch. We don't need another one. As much, even though I would love it to death, and I'd probably play it like religiously. Um, that that specific niche of game is covered. I think doing a 3D game would be unique for, well, first of all for the series, but also just on the Switch because like I said, yeah, the 2D game is already there. So I think I do think that's probably where they're going. Deep down I believe it.
I think so too. It's been such a long time, and considering the most impressive Switch games and the ones that sell the best are the 3D games, the more ambitious games, I feel like, yeah, there has to be something in the line that is more ambitious, something that's more impressive. And yeah, I do talk about how Nintendo has declined all the time, and I always bring up the games like the sports games, and some will probably comment, oh, you think that Donkey Kong is going to launch unfinished? No, this has just been a problem for the multiplayer games because the single player games have pretty much remained solid on the Switch. I think it's just really been a problem with multiplayer games, and really the main problems with the Switch games, like I said, it's usually stuff like the Mario sports games or Switch Sports or stuff like that, and just not getting things like a new Mario Kart. That's really what I've been critical of. It's just stuff we haven't gotten and just the sports games, but everything else has been really good. So I feel like with a new Donkey Kong game, there definitely is going to be a level of ambition with it, and considering everything Nintendo has done, I think that there are huge plans for the series going forward.
Yeah, it is definitely looking bright, I would say. Just with all the stuff that we know and some of the things that we've heard that we don't necessarily know are true, but at the very least sound promising. It does sound like something's coming. So
Yeah, I will say, things are going to start looking bright once we see Donkey Kong stickers on bananas like we did in 2010.
yeah,
I still remember that. I thought it was the coolest thing seeing Donkey Kong stickers on bananas. That was just something I remembered and something that was just incredibly fitting. Great marketing, by the
yeah,
way. But
yeah.
before wrapping this up, I did have one more question. Do you think that the Kong family will be coming back? Because with the movie, we've seen not only the standard Dixie Kong, Diddy Kong, and Cranky Kong, and even Funky Kong, but we saw more obscure characters. We saw Kitty Kong. We saw Swanky Kong. You think that this could be the game where we see the Kong family come back? Because there are a ton of characters, and a lot of them we haven't seen in years. So it would be so cool seeing them again.
I truly hope so. That is one of the more disappointing things for me since the Rare buyout is that they haven't really utilized a lot of those characters, in a very long time. And just seeing some of the obscure references that they're putting into this Mario movie between Kiddy Kong and even more obscure than that, Swanky Kong looks like he might be in the movie, at least based on one of the designs that was there, which is just wow. I never thought I would see the day that Swanky Kong would be in a big Mario blockbuster movie. Um, so I do think that bodes very well for them to be utilizing the extended Kong family and cast of those games in the future. And another big factor pointing towards that too, I believe, just K. Rool's inclusion in Super Smash Brothers, which I think that was 4 years ago today,
Yeah,
actually.
4 years ago
Um,
exactly.
Yep. I think that is a really big point too. That they're probably going to bring those characters back. K. Rool hadn't been in a game in over 10 years at the point that
Wasn't
Smash
Super
Ultimate
Mario
came out.
Sluggers or Mario Super Sluggers the last game he was in? The baseball game on the Wii?
Yup, and that was 10 years prior to Smash Ultimate. So the fact that he came back at all is just it's a miracle. It's miracle work, I tell you.
I will
And then,
say, like
yeah,
with Smash specifically, it's good you brought that up, and I feel like bring K. Rool back. That's definitely a good sign. But with Smash and stuff, you always see characters that are more obscure that haven't really appeared in anything just come back for Smash. The Ice Climbers only had like what, 2 games? The Ice Climbers game on NES and the port on Japanese computers. We could talk about re-releases and stuff, and the Duck Hunt duo. They have a complete modern design, but again, they're only utilized in Smash. But
hmm
you think that it's a different case for K. Rool? Because I feel like, yeah, if they're gonna have a new Donkey Kong game, they have to have K. Rool, and I feel like him in
yeah,
Smash would be a good indicator.
yeah. I do think it is a different case because K. Rule. The only reason that he got in the Smash Ultimate was because of the Smash ballot and the overwhelming amount of support that character got to get into the game. So Nintendo now has the knowledge and the data to show and prove that he is a very popular character and people want to see him back in the DK series. And
I mean, I like the characters that Retro came up with, not so much the Tikis from Returns, but I like the Snowmads. But I mean, considering I am the Gator himself, K. Rool is the best,
Oh yeah, I
easily.
love K. Rool. I mean, he was like the character I wanted the most in that game for years. Let me tell you, when that reveal happened, I literally got high from the excitement. I was just over the moon.
Yeah, it was exciting.
um,
I will say
it
that with
was it
Smash
was so good.
Ultimate, there was a lot of talk about it in 2018. That's pretty much Nintendo's. They really only had that to showcase, so it did get annoying for me at E3 2018 specifically, but oh my gosh, I was over the moon excited when K. Rool was announced to be there. Would he be your favorite newcomer in the game?
Oh, absolutely. He's going to be I mean that's I don't even need another Smash game. That he is the only character that I've ever wanted as much as I did. So
Well, we had
the fact that
Pac-Man
that happened,
before.
I was
It was Pac-Man and
yeah
K. Rool for me.
yeah. Pac-Man was a pretty cool addition too. But yeah, K. Rule, man, that just takes the cake for me. And then Banjo was just the icing on top of that then for me too.
Absolutely. And just having
Yeah.
amiibo figures of them too. That is great.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't know
for
if you
real.
have them, but having a K. Rool figure with a modern
Yep.
design is just awesome. Same for Banjo.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like this about wraps it up. You have any other ideas for what's in store for the Donkey Kong series? And just overall, what could we be seeing sometime in the near future?
Well, I think the future looks bright. I really think that's probably the best way to cap this off. Is that I think DK fans can rest easy knowing that there's there are good things coming. I mean, Nintendo wouldn't be going as all out as they are with these characters in this movie and making an entire theme park based around the series and the characters and stuff like that if there weren't bigger plans in place. You don't go 10 years without releasing a game in the series and still do all of this fan service work in like big expensive ways if you don't have something else planned. So I do think we're in good hands.
I think so too. Well, anyways, that about wraps it up. Thank you, Uncle Al, for being part of the discussion, and in the meantime, I will be playing some Donkey Konga. I'll be playing Donkey Konga 3. I can't understand any of it, but it's Donkey Konga, so it's gotta be good.
That sounds like the way to go. Yeah, get some Donkey Konga in there.
Now, I think I'm gonna be doing the more traditional thing and getting footage of the Donkey Kong Country games and playing through those, as well as probably Donkey Kong Jungle Beat. Although I'll be playing the new Play Control one. Have you played that one?
Actually, haven't. That's actually yeah, I haven't played that version.
I think you'll get a new appreciation for the game playing it there. I just feel like it controls better and just is an overall better game. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I'm Demeech,
And I'm Uncle Al.
and keep calm and da-da on.